It's 3 minutes past 12.
Still only a few strokes to go. New South Wales in the lead, and New South Wales have won the Youth Age by a canvas at the finish. Only a metre or two in it, with Victoria in second place. Very close for third, about a length and a half back to the title holders. Queensland a canvas away to South Australia, half a length back to Western Australia, and 3/4 of a length back to Tasmania in sixth position. I'm on the air, mate.
Hello, I'm Norman May, and I'm on the air, mate. That's the catch cry of ABC radio commentators who stood on batter boxes, looked over fences, and sat in crowded grandstands to broadcast sporting events live. It all started 50 years ago, back in 1932. And in those days, the Australian radio public was brought up on a diet of Don Bradman and the Melbourne Cup.
Our Don Bradman, now I ask you, is he any good? Our Don Bradman, as the batsman, he is certainly plump wood. Peyton Larwood meets their...
And moving up well on the rails, Bo Nilly, and then Rod Giller, and Peter Pan coming into it. Oh, Uramba will bolt in. He's come round the outside of the field and looks to have them all well beaten. Uramba wins it all right. He's coming away from Peter Pan, who's finishing on a bit strongly. Now Peter Pan might get there. It's going to Peter Pan will win it. Peter Pan will win it. Peter Pan wins from Uramba with Shadow King third.
Eric Welsh calling the 1932 Melbourne Cup the first to be broadcast by the ABC. The event which had and still has the capacity to stop the nation. But it was Don Bradman who exerted a major influence on sport broadcasting in this country. As Australia's greatest sporting hero, there was a real demand for news and reports of his exploits. In the 30s, cricket was #1, and the ABC made radio history by presenting synthetic broadcasts of the test matches from England. The brains behind this brilliant scheme was the former general manager of the ABC, Charles Moses.
I have been asked to explain to you how the synthetic ball-by-ball descriptions are broadcast by the national stations. Let us follow the course of a typical message as received in the Commission's Sydney studios only a minute after the actual happening on the test ground in England. This cable is taken down in duplicate and immediately amplified by cricket experts who fill in details regarding field placements on model cricket fields for the commentator, whom you can now see broadcasting his description from the amplified cable information. As the shot is made, the effects man, who has in front of him a copy of the cable message, drops the needle on an effects record, and listeners hear the applause of the crowd as the shot reaches the boundary. And now, let us listen in.
Barnes bowling to Bradman. It's a short ball. Bradman moves back and pulls fiercely past square leg. Hutton running well from deep fine leg has no chance. The ball goes under the ropes for another 4. That's 4 more to Bradman, taking his score to 97. A typical Bradman shot, giving the fieldsman no chance of saving the boundary. Now Ames throws the ball back to Barnes. Barnes turns, runs in, bowling to Bradman. This ball well pitched. Bradman moves forward, drives. Cotton at cover tries to cut it off, but is beaten by the pace of the ball, and it races away for another 4. 4 more to Bradman, taking his score to 101. A century in 130 minutes, a glorious innings by us, and Australia is now building herself into a very strong position, assisted by a great knock by Bradman.
And do you recognise the voice of the unnamed commentator? He's still on the air today, and his name is a household word in all parts of the cricketing world, Alan McGilvray.
Technique in broadcasting has changed a good deal since those days, and in 1935 it was that I did my first broadcast. But my first major assignment was when I was invited to join the panel in the synthetic broadcasts. An operation by Charles Moses that was unbelievable at the time. But then came the 1946 tour, when I was fortunate to be coupled with Victor Richardson and Arthur Gilligan. That was a great benefit to me, and I was associated with who I think was the greatest broadcaster of all time, and still do, Victor Richardson.
Let's go again to Bradman. The ball, Bradman reaching for it. On the leg stump, makes sure that he gets over it and keeps it down. However, it ran very slowly away to Icon, feeling forward short leg and very close. A little closer even to the wicket than Icon, than Yardley. Betzer bowls to Bradman.
And he's bowling. Bradman is out for a duck.
Betzer clean bowl, Bradman. And I feel sure that it's been done by splendid tactics of Hammond in forcing those three men in close to him and cutting him out at his scoring shot as he usually likes to open.
And that was Victor Richardson broadcasting in the Adelaide Test in 1947. Now, just for comparison, let's hear Alan McGilvray broadcasting from England in the famous Don Bradman series in 1948.
Compton comes in again, bowling to Hassett. Hassett pushes forward to this, and he's caught and bowled. I hope you heard that before the crowd, but Hassett has out caught and bowled Compton. It was a ball that lifted rather sharply. Hassett played forward to it, spooned it high in the air, and Compton had to make time to get to it. He went down, flying down the wicket, and caught it with his left hand.
Well, Alan, listening to that broadcast in 1948 compared to 1938 in the synthetics, there was a noticeable difference in your technique.
I attribute that mostly to Vic Richardson. He guided me right along the way. If you'll notice Vic's comment when Bradman was bowled in that recording, he later assessed why Bradman got out because of the close infieldsman. And there again, he used to say to me, Mac, never try and beat the crowd. As you notice the delay after I gave that dismissal, beat in your dismissal, get the man out, hush, and let the crowd tell their story, and you control yourself meantime so that you can come back onto the air with the full knowledge that the story has been truly given to the public. That was his lesson.
Well, I thought there that another point which to me has always been the keynote of your broadcasting, that you were able to coincide and get the dismissal before the crowd even goes, and you said, I hope I've beaten the crowd, which you did. Now, has that been the basis of your broadcasting, to coincide the bat hitting the ball with your comments?
Yes, entirely, Norman. You must beat the crowd. Slip catches are sometimes difficult. Catches down the leg side are difficult, but if you can give the call, then the crowd, you imagine people in their lounge rooms, mother, he's out, or something like that. That excitement is prevailing in the home, and you mustn't give anything at that time to let the excitement in the homes be known, and you must yourself control yourself.
Well, let's hear briefly a series of commentators who worked for the ABC over a period of about 30, 40 years.
2 for 217, and here we are, just like you folk, waiting for the run that will give the Australian captain his 100. Oh, this time he's got it. The roar of the crowd puts up 100. And the total 218. The Englishmen, showing splendid sporting spirit, are clapping, and also McCabe is congratulating Bradman by patting his hand onto his bat. 100 up once more to Bradman, McCabe being 67 and 2 down for 218. Here the cheering breaking out in the great outer stand, which is comfortably filled today, and the game is held up whilst we await next ball from Hammond. Hammond does not wait for the applause to die down, and another sweet shot, late cut. Here comes the racehorse. Hard stuff. We've got to stand up to see whether he saves it, but it's 4.
The Australians on the field in two groups. A group clustered around McCormick and O'Reilly, who were responsible for the dismissal of Hardstaff, and another group with the wicketkeeper and Wyatt and a couple of the umpires at this near end of the wicket. Here comes O'Reilly again, swinging that arm of his. Over it comes, and that one is neatly turned to fine leg. They may get a couple for it. Badcock is coming round very hard towards the side screen, and they're going for their second.
Now Wright has reached the mark, and he's coming in again to Morris. Morris on 199. In he comes. Bowling to Morris. Morris goes back and turns this one. They're going through for a sharp single as the ball kicked away from Freddie Brown, a square leg. And there's Morris's double century.
Back with Benno. In he comes, bowls again. Plenty of air, and it's hit high back over the bowler's head, and it's 6, I think. Yes, 6.
And Hall's got a bowl round the wicket, Michael.
Well, I've never seen this before. Hall's changed to round the wicket.
Well, let's see what he does with this one. He was off the beam with the first ball. 3 to come, and here's the third last one as he whacks it down to Mackay, and it's a good one, too. And Mackay stays in forward at point, though. There's no run there. He goes right out towards the point fence. A long chase for Worrell.
Chipping a bit now. Well, what a wonderful match this has been. What a wonderful match. And the West Indians had it all won, except on the last day. I mean, a test match in which you get a man making 100 in each innings and a hat-trick. And there were 3 people thrown out in the one day. And you get performances like Alexander, 63 and 87 not out and 6 catches. Benno's bowling, 200 wickets, and missing. The way he bowled, and that catch and bowl of his, and the batting we've seen here today from people like O'Neill and Burge, and Simpson in the first innings, and McDonald in the first innings, Wally Grout today, Conrad Hunt, Cammy Smith, all these chaps. Worrell himself, a wonderful match.
Well, the final voice there was Johnny Moyes, and the commentators before that in sequence were Mel Morris and Charles Moses in the 30s, Bernard Kerr in the 50s, Bob Richardson and Michael Charlton in the 60s. Alan, Johnny Moyes.
How lucky I've been in my life, really. I mentioned Vic, and now to come to another great student and a man that helped me a lot, Johnny Moyes. Johnny had a great knowledge. He was always prepared to help you, explain some of the things that you might have missed in a generous way, as did, following in that, Lindsay Hassett, who is now retired. I've been a very lucky man in that regard, and having the benefit of those great men to guide me.
Yes, the difference there, of course, is between the describing commentator, as you were and are, and the expert commentator who talked, say, between overs, or sometimes, as Johnny did there, summed up a match in about 45 seconds.
Exactly. He did that out of his head, you know. He didn't have a note in front of him. But you see, the teams they had, Gilligan, Richardson, then Moyes, and then Hassett, it's been blended through the ABC, and I think the ABC have gained a lot in that regard for having such skilled men.
What about very exciting finishes, as that Adelaide test was? That was their famous drawn test over there. Mackay and Klein batted for 100 minutes. That you must have had situations in your career where that you could feel the emotion of the situation, that you had to control yourself. Did you ever have any problems with the excitement of the game?
Many times, Norman. I don't know how I would have handled that situation of the tied test, because no one, even the players, knew that the score was tied. But coming to that match in Melbourne later in the same tour, when the falling bail incident that expression created by Johnny Moyes, that was another one that needed a lot of control. But I can assure you, Norman, that in early years, that I recall when Linwood was bowling to Hutton on the Melbourne cricket ground in front of 50, 60,000 people, I cried. So, you see, emotion gets you, Norman, and there you must control it. And my method is get to the ground early, read through the conditions of tour, get yourself familiar with the game, really line yourself up with it, and get composure before you start. And that is, I think, something you must maintain right throughout the 6-hour day, watching, as you do, every ball.
Well, I think an example of excitement in cricket, as you mentioned, the tied test, and let's hear the end of that match. And the commentators here are Clive Harburg and Johnny Moyes.
Ball now to make it. Moves in. On his leg stump. Tries to sweep it, and here's a stolen single, and he might be run out, and Hall misses the stump. The ball past the wickets. Brout was down the wicket like a shot. Called Meckiff. Meckiff a little late starting off. Hall ran up, gathered the ball, had a shot at the stumps. One by Sundry's 14. Meckiff has yet to score. Grout is 1. 8 for 229. Ball to Grout. Grout skies him. 3 of them, 4 of them getting under it. Can High catches it, and it's dropped. It's dropped. Ball and Can. 4 of them converged on the ball. Hall dropped it. Hall eventually got his hands to it, but Canhigh came in, and I'm sure he balked Hall in his efforts to catch that one. Australia requiring 3 runs to win. And 3 balls to go. Hall steps in off the mark. Shirt trailing behind him. Bowls to Meckiff. Meckiff pulls him high into the outfield. 4 runs. No, it won't get to the fence. They're going for the 3, though. Trout slides his bat behind the line. He's flying for it, and he's out. Run out! Run out! Start, run out! Two runs only. Australia still requiring 1 run to win. Australia 9 for 232 as Lindsay Klein comes out. The last man for Australia, 2 balls to go in this test match. All back at his bowling mark. He will bowl to Klein. And here's the single that wins the match for Australia. He's out! He's right out! Right out!
Well, an unforgettable finish, the fabulous tie in Brisbane in December 1960. Now, I'm going to recall something now, one of your broadcasts from the West Indies in 1978.
ABC, Alan McGilvray here. The riot's still going on. There's the police are out in the middle, a lot of bottles are still all over the ground. I don't know what Simpson's going to do, but the manager of Mr. Bennett's out there in the middle. Well, they're not in the middle. They're well away from where there's bottles and stones are being thrown. And the police surround them as they leave the ground. Now ball bottles are coming, and they took out the double off the ground, and they're being rained with bottles. But hundreds of bottles are pouring on there. The players are for shovels, and they're in under cover. Now, all we see on the field now are dozens and dozens of police. And as they run off the field, they were showered. And the umpire's been taken off under protection. This is not funny.
Alan, it wasn't funny.
That's an understatement, Norman. Not funny. It was most unpleasant, and I wondered that some of our players were not hurt when those bottles were coming down from the first floor right onto them, and yet no one suffered any injury. They were very fortunate.
Alan, we've got to the end of 50 years of cricket broadcasting in the ABC. Was it a good 50?
I'd love to go through it again, but that's not possible. And cricket's gone through its problems the last few years. It'll recover. Problems are there. They're getting over them, and cricket will still be good 50 years from now.
Alan McGilvray, and that then is the story of ABC Radio Cricket. Few people are aware that cricket was not the only sport to be broadcast synthetically by the ABC. In 1953, the rugby union series in South Africa between the Springboks and the Wallabies were broadcast from the ABC's Sydney studios. The only information was 12 25-word cables sent 8 minutes apart. The describer was Bob Richardson, and the expert was one of the all-time greats of Australian rugby union, the former international Cyril Towers. And during that series, he made one of the most amazing forecasts I've ever heard. The cable came in and it said, Australian hooker Brown, round front line out, near score corner. And Cyril Towers said, I think Australia can win this game. And at that stage, the Springboks rated 9 out of 10 and the Australians about 1 out of 10. And what happened? The Australians did win. Now, how did Cyril Towers, from that meagre information, come to that conclusion?
Yes, well, you start off with the basic principle that a big man can't run a good mile. And the point is that with Brown getting away like that, it was perfectly obvious that the 16-stone South African forwards were tired. They were tired, and Australia had every opportunity there of getting the game and scoring a try, and that's exactly what they did just before the concluding moments of the game.
Well, that was one of the most thrilling tries, I think, in rugby history. It was Garth Jones, the big red-headed Queensland winger.
That's right.
Who broke away, and I believe that Henny Muller, who was a great Springbok number 8, chased him the whole length of the field, and Muller, in fact, wrote a book about it and wrote a full chapter of his book about that particular try.
Yes, he was nonplussed when he couldn't catch the winger getting away, but that fella had a bit of pace, and Muller himself was a bit leg weary too, and he made no impression on him, and the final try went over, and it was a winning try for the game.
Cyril, would you rate that as the most fearless forecast you've ever made in football broadcasting?
One of the ones, and one that I was prepared to defend.
Well, thinking back to those broadcasts, Cyril, I believe some of the matches went for about 2.5 hours, and you had to keep going.
Oh, yes, we had to keep going. Well, that one where they lost the cable, that was a beauty. And it was going around Sydney somewhere, and they were trying to find it, and everybody had come in, and we were doing the broadcast, and and they'd shake their hands and waddle their head like that. No, we haven't got the cable. We haven't got the cable, so we just had to keep going. And I heard some comments after that while we were going there with no cable to build on, it was some of the most exciting football I've ever heard tell of. We had some imaginary tries, and one was an overlap which we constructed. The fullback came in on the blind side of play from a scrum on the 25, and away the try was there. We forecast the try. He's away, he's right. The referee was left behind, and he brought it back and made it a scrum on the 25.
So you disallowed the try?
Disallowed the try.
Those matches were played in the 50s, and it's interesting to reflect on the change in public likes and dislikes down the years. Professional boxing hardly exists in Australia these days, but it was right in the category of major sport in the 40s and 50s. Here's the broadcast of the famous fight between Vic Patrick and Freddie Dawson. Commentators Lockie Melville and Harold Baker.
They're fighting hard in close. Both men are very tired, very weary. But they're throwing punches. Patrick staggered then. Patrick staggered. Staggered back towards Dawson's corner. It wasn't from any punch that... Oh! Patrick has knocked Dawson right outside the ropes. Patrick knocked Dawson right outside the ropes with a beautiful left to the jaw. Dawson comes in again. He's falling all over the ring. Patrick holds him up. And there's the bell. Patrick knocked him right outside the ropes, but he staggered back, and Patrick was just measuring him for the knockout as the bell went for the end of the 11th. Back to Harold Baker.
Well, Patrick nailed Dawson then just where he wanted him, hit him with a long left, more a left swing than anything, and Dawson went sailing through the ropes and sat down outside. He staggered back into the ring and fell again onto the ropes at the southern side, and the bell went, which definitely saved him. He wouldn't have had a dog's chance had it not been for that final bell. He was very sick and very stupid when he got up. He didn't know where his corner was. His seconds grabbed him and, of course, put him down. He appears from here to have recovered a fair bit, and there is the bell. Back to you, Lockie.
Here's the last round. The crowd is mad with excitement. They're mad with excitement as Patrick is fighting this fellow and nearly knocked him out on the last round, in the 11th round. Patrick comes after Dawson. Dawson, with tremendous courage, fights him off. Patrick coming back to him again, jabs the right to the head, misses with a left swing. Dawson comes back with left to the body. Dawson throws a right and staggers Patrick against the ropes. Dawson catches Patrick with a beautiful right hand in close. Dawson is punishing Patrick. Patrick is staggering back. Dawson's got him out. Patrick is down. Patrick is down. The referee is counting 4, 5, 6. Patrick is up. He's up at 7. Patrick is up. Dawson rushes in again, and the referee counts Dawson the winner.
The 1st of September 1947, and as we listen now 35 years later, we can observe that what was popular then comes over as a pretty bloodthirsty business these days. Another event which has declined in interest since in boom days in the 50s is the Davis Cup. Do you remember those epic tennis battles between Australia and the United States? Lou Hode of Australia and Vic Seixas, United States, commentator Ellis Blaine.
Hode has to take Seixas' service this time to win the rubber. It's on to Hode's backhand. Seixas volleys for the backhand side, and nicely passed by Hode that time. Hode swung that one straight down the forehand sideline. Seixas got his racket to it, but it went straight off at an acute angle, and he had no hope of getting it in. Love 15 with Seixas serving. It's to Hode's backhand. Seixas volleys down the center of the court. A high return by Hode. Seixas smashes for the forehand corner, but it's out over the baseline. Very close, that one. Love 30. Love 30. Seixas down 3-5 on his own service. It's to Hode's forehand. A high return. A fault. Just over the sideline. Moves back for the second service. It's on to Hode's backhand this time. A good service, and Hode returns into the net. 15-30. 15-30, Seixas serving from the southern end to Lewis Hode. It's on to Hode's backhand, a short return from Hode, volleyed by Seixas into the net, and that is 2 set points, 2 match points to Lewis Hode. 2 set and match points to Lewis Hode on Seixas' serve. Now it's Seixas to serve. He hesitates for a moment, and it's a fault over the service line.
Quite a strong breeze sprung up as Seychelles was about to serve. This is on to Hode's forehand, a short return. Seychelles backhand, high in the air, smashed by Seychelles and by Hode, and Seychelles fails to return. The match is all over, and the two players congratulate one another at the net. The match goes to, the rubber goes to Lewis Hode, 6-4, 6-2, 6-3.
And speaking for the losing team, Vic Seychelles.
I would like to thank everyone for the very sporting manner in which they received all of us here, and to reiterate what the others have said, we have very many pleasant memories to take back with us to America. I hope that whoever makes the trip down next year, should we get through the challenge round, will be welcomed the same as we have. Thank you very much.
Compare that attitude to John McEnroe at Wimbledon 1981.
This guy's an incompetent fool. That's what he is, right? And we're not going to have a point taken away because I said nothing that was like obscene or anything. I said he was the pits of the world. That's exactly what he is.
Oh, another point against McEnroe.
Ladies and gentlemen, has been awarded against Mr. McEnroe for insulting the referee.
The decline of interest in the Davis Cup does not mean that tennis is a fading sport. In truth, it's quite the opposite. It's all a matter of winning and losing. And the Frank Sedgmans, the Lou Hodes, the Ken Rosewalls and the John Newcombs are no longer with us. Australians prefer winners to losers. And here's a more recent Wimbledon ladies final in 1971. Margaret Court opposed to Yvonne Goolagong.
Is good. A forehand return by Goolagong. Court a backhand down the centre. Goolagong a forehand down the line. Deep, a backhand there. Forehand stop shot. Court races up, gets a lob, a smash by Goolagong. Court gets it back. A forehand down the line is in, I think. Fourth match point if it was in.
Advantage, Miss Goolagong.
Indeed it was. Fourth match point against Court. From the left-hand court she serves too long. Now what will this one be? She's got to keep it inside that service box. Second one, it's a double! It's a double, that's Goolagong. Over centre court, absolutely packed, not an empty seat anywhere. And now the usual situation.
6-4, 6-1.
First of all, George Hole indicating the score that Yvonne Goolagong, 19 years of age from Barellan in New South Wales, is the new Wimbledon title holder. And now she is onto the green carpet and walking to the table on which there is resting the plate that will be presented to Yvonne Goolagong. Applause for this little girl that has done so magnificently. She curtsies, her face beaming. I think she's won the hearts of everybody here in this country by her manner, her dignity on court, by her serenity. And now Princess Alexandra has words with her.
Yvonne Goolagong, or Yvonne Cawley as she is now, has charmed Australian radio audiences for more than 10 years. And it's apparent in an individual game like tennis, you need star players to get star billing. At the other end of the scale are the sports which have increased in popularity purely on the basis of success. This report on rugby union from Ron Davies.
The high point of the 1980 season was Australia's great Test Series win over the mighty New Zealand All Blacks. Australia boasted one of its most exciting backlines in history and was confident of an historic retention of the coveted Bledisloe Cup. The series finished 2-1 in Australia's favour, with both wins staged at the famous Sydney Cricket Ground. The third test in front of a record crowd of 48,690.
Carson waiting for the scrum to set, and New Zealand put in the charge, but the Australians hold well, and across the back line it goes. Across now to Roger Gould coming in, and now out to Brendan, Peter Grigg. A little chip over the top by Grigg. He's collected the ball, he's going over for a try! A great try by Peter Grigg! Just inside New Zealand territory.
15 metres in from touch. Across the Australian back line now to Mick Hawker, who'll prop and run back to the short side. There's no way back there, but linked up with his forwards. Now they'll try another one, a third phase maul. And now to O'Connor standing at 5'8". O'Connor sees the slight gap and gets it out now to Cornelson standing outside. Now on to Brendan Moon. Brendan Moon almost in the clear. Sends back an inside kick. Underneath it is Greg Cornelson waiting for it. Goes up for it, but can't bring it down. Plays about 10 metres out from the New Zealand goal line, and Australia going in for this maul. Way offside is Loveridge, but Australia, the referee says play on because there might be advantage. And across it goes to Gould. On now to O'Connor. And out to O'Connor. O'Connor trying for line and scores!
And greater public interest means a wider coverage by the ABC. It's significant that an ABC commentator, Gordon Bray, was the first to tour the United Kingdom with the Australian Rugby Union team last year. Another sport which has risen from minor to major status is soccer. And there's no doubt that the voice of Australian soccer is Martin Royal, who's described his radio trips with the Socceroos as a cook's tour of the third world. Martin broadcast his first match for the ABC in 1951.
In my time, I can claim to have broadcast the game from many and varied locations. I remember covering Canterbury Marrickville's home matches from the drafty old grandstand at Arlington Oval, climbing perilously up a rickety ladder to reach my commentary position on top of the toilets at Mona Park, Auburn, and indeed, on one occasion during torrential rain at nearby Garside Park, we actually set up inside the toilets while I did my broadcast standing on one of the seats and peering out through an iron grill. My first experience of covering international soccer was in the days when Australia was being walloped by all and sundry. Although, as I can recall at the Sydney Showground that day in 1952, the locals held a team from Hong Kong, masquerading under the name of China, to about 3-1. There was the soccer at the Olympic Games, of course, in 1956, when, during the course of a series of abortive crosses to my position at Melbourne's Olympic Park, I actually swore on air, I may add, for the first and only time in my career. And then followed the bad, or were they good days, of the early 1960s, when Australia was banned by the FIFA for poaching European players. And that fantastic full-house grand final at the Sydney Sports Ground between Apia and South Coast United in 1963. Memories, too, of the first time the ABC sent a commentator to cover an overseas soccer tour in 1967, when I had the pleasure of accompanying Uncle Joe Blassett's team, led by a young whiz-kid by the name of Johnny Warren, on the nation's safari that included war-torn Vietnam. Australia's winning goals in that tournament were punctuated by the explosion of Viet Cong bombs in nearby suburbs. In 1969, Australia's quest in the World Cup took me back to Asia, to Seoul, and later on a tortuous trip to Tel Aviv via Mozambique. 4 years later, after Tehran, Seoul again, and Hong Kong, the real thing, the World Cup finals in West Germany. In 1977, it was back to Seoul, Hong Kong, Tehran, and Kuwait, but sadly, Jimmy Shoulder's team of that year was found wanting. And we never did say hello, let alone goodbye, to Argentina. As for the Rudi Guttendorf debacle last year, well, the least said the better. Come to think of it, though, it would have been rather nice celebrating the ABC's 50th birthday in Spain.
Well, the future of Australian soccer may well rest with the youngsters in their hands or even in their feet, following the showing of the team in the World Youth Cup. And this is a match between Australia and West Germany in Canberra, and the retiring commentator Martin Royal teams up with the new boy, Peter Wilkins.
And sweeping play downfield from West Germany, almost all them with a goal, and great excitement here at the Bruce Stadium at Canberra. At one end, Australia a chance through David Mitchell, and that could so easily have been goal number one.
Nice pass to Patikas, and Patikas has the arm of an opponent, York, round him, and he's been given a penalty. Australia have a penalty. Patikas goes down. I don't think he needs to worry too much. He's got the penalty. York it was who put out his arm, grabbed him by the shirt, and definitely impeded his progress. And a penalty is the result. Kus has to take it. Referee waves him on, and it's saved by the keeper.
And that was a live broadcast of soccer, one of the many sports which have been broadcast down the years by the ABC. In fact, there's a saying here, if it moves, it can be broadcast. You know that watching the America's Cup has been described as standing in a field and watching the grass grow. It's that slow. And yet Bert Oliver, the ABC commentator, has done live broadcasts of the America's Cup.
The Australian challenger, Gradle 2, has just dropped her spinnaker, and with Genoa up, she's now hard on the wind and around the 5th mark, and has a quite substantial lead in these light conditions over the American defender Intrepid. We have the clock on her. This will be an unofficial time, but Gradle's lead will be around about 30 to 40 seconds at this vital 5th leg. And this has been a wonderful piece of sailing by the Australians on Gradle. After they'd been 1 minute 12 seconds behind at the 4th leg, they've really sailed this boat well. A magnificent full-bellied spinnaker with John Bertrand doing the trimming, and David Forbes had the helm on that downwind leg, made up that deficit of 72 seconds and has now opened up to nearly 50 seconds over Intrepid. She's not on the wind yet. The spinnaker is down. She's just hardening up to come around the mark, and Intrepid is now around, and the margin in Gradle's favour is 55 seconds.
And how's this for a description of a two-horse race? Champion paces Pure Steel and Satnova in a match race at Gloucester Park in Perth. The commentator is George Griliusich.
They come down past the 800-metre mark in 1:22.8. And they're just outside the 2-minute break, but they're going very fast, and Pure Steel gets to within a neck of Satnova as they go into the final circuit now. Two great horses, and both performing brilliantly. Both drivers also giving a great exhibition as they go towards the back. 550 to run. Satnova holding Pure Steel out by a long neck now. Pure Steel laying down the gauntlet, 450 metres to go. On the dead level, Pure Steel puts his head in front past the 400 in 151.49. And they're inside the 2-minute break on Pure Steel. Gets out about a half a neck in front of Satnova. Satnova's got something left on the inside, although Johnson starts to go for the whip now. Inside the 200 is Pure Steel, just in front of Satnova. 150 to go, Pure Steel the leader. Satnova lifting on the inside, but Pure Steel in front halfway down the straight. And Satnova's winning run comes to an end as Pure Steel so good. He wins by a length of a quarter on Satnova, and the time 2:20.99.
Horse race broadcasting is really a specialist skill, and down the years the ABC's had some great commentators because horse racing has been broadcast on the ABC for all of those 50 years in all capital cities of Australia. Eric Welsh, you heard broadcasting the 1932 Melbourne Cup. Lockie Melville, whom you heard as a fight commentator, was also a famous race caller. And another one who is well known in the days of yore, the Brisbane commentator, Keith Nowd.
Things were different in race broadcasting when I started with the ABC back in the early 30s. For instance, the sophisticated gadgetry of today, of course, was missing. City facilities weren't bad for broadcasting, but a little rougher in the country, where the ABC broadcast numerous important meetings, sometimes in the open air. I well remember falling off a box during the running of a Toowoomba Cup, but scrambled back in time for the finish, and also getting drenched in teeming rain during a Rockhampton Newmarket, when visibility was close to zero. And I saw and called the race in which a skinny little teenager had his first major success, the Doomba Newmarket of 1940. The little hoop was still excited 24 hours later. The horse was Expressman, and the jockey's name, George Moore.
And Keith Nowd's fondest memory in broadcasting was the last race of the mighty Tulloch.
Into the straight in the Brisbane Cup, and Sharpley was still nicely clear. A length from Tulloch, and Moore's gone for the whip on Tulloch now, then Prince Razan followed by Drumcondra. Down to the furlong pole, Sharpley was the leader from Tulloch. Both horses ridden desperately. Sharpley's just in front. Tulloch trying to raise another effort on the outside. Tulloch upsides with Sharpley, and head and head they're going. Tulloch might have his head in front of Sharpley. Tulloch in front. Tulloch going like a train now, and Tulloch won the Brisbane Cup. Sharpley second, third was Drumcondra, then Soldor Wynyard.
The year 1961. These days, radio broadcasting is an accepted part of the racing scene, but it wasn't always that way. A pioneer broadcaster, the late Lockie Melville.
One of the old pony clubs in Sydney, Victoria Park, went to court in an effort to put a ban on the broadcasts. And it was not until the matter came before the Privy Council in London that the radio stations were given the all clear to carry on. In the early 1930s, I was employed by a commercial station, and we had a stand erected in a fowl yard overlooking Rosebery Racecourse. Part of the equipment was a bag of wheat, which my assistant used to scatter among the birds to keep them quiet while the races were run. After some years, the race clubs realised the futility of attempting to block the broadcasts, and they agreed to admit the radio stations to their racecourses, where they now occupy the most favourable positions. At Warwick Farm Racecourse in Sydney in 1933, the Australian Jockey Club introduced the public address system and engaged a race caller to enable their patrons to hear as well as see what was happening in races. This new feature was immediately popular with racegoers and is now an accepted part of practically every race meeting in the Commonwealth.
And today's course broadcaster in Sydney is also the ABC commentator, Jeff Marnie.
I became the last of the Sydney racing commentators to call a race outside the course. That was at Rose Hill. The horses couldn't be seen for the first 600 metres because of a line of trees which totally blocked off the race caller's view. Nearly 30 years have gone by since those pioneering days of race commentating. Today we find the caller in the luxury of a spacious, well-carpeted broadcast room with air conditioning, television, and a panel of communication buttons. It's almost like sitting behind the controls of a jet plane. The difference being the pilot doesn't really have to fly the plane, but the race caller still has to describe the action. In 1957, the Sydney Turf Club inaugurated a race called the Golden Slipper Stakes, giving prize money of £10,000. The event was won by that great sprinter Todman, who streeted his rivals. The race was called by my predecessor, Lockie Melville, who retired early the following year. That 1957 Golden Slipper Stakes is the only one I haven't called. The race today is regarded as the richest two-year-old classic in the world, with prize money in excess of $250,000. Vane was the first of the Victorian youngsters to win the great race, and he scored probably the most memorable win. In the later years, Luskin Star turned in a great performance in winning running right away from his rivals.
At the 600, Princess Teleria next, and then King's Frolic, and then Pacific Prince. Luskin Star's in a good spot. Then Mondiso and Star System. Lloyd Boyer's well back into the straight, and Mistress Anne headed up clear of Blazing Saddles, throwing out the challenge. Then Princess Teleria, here's Luskin Star. Down the outside, he's going to be the big danger to them. Luskin Star went to Blazing Saddles at the 200, and the slipper's all over. Luskin Star is racing well clear from Blazing Saddles. Lloyd Boy's putting in a claim, but look at Luskin Star go. He's putting a gap in them. Luskin Star's going to win this by 6 lengths. Lloyd Boy's second, Blazing Saddles third, then Princess
And
Teleria.
what better way to round off the racing segment with the story of a great race told by a great commentator, the Melbourne Cup and Joe Brown.
In his book, The Melbourne Cup, co-author Maurice Kavanagh describes the event as more than just a horse race. It's an institution that stops the whole nation, a part of a way of life, a race that reaches across the Tasman to thrill all New Zealanders for a few minutes on the first Tuesday in November. People gather round radio and television sets to hear and see the running of the great race. It has now achieved worldwide renown and is a national event. What better compliment could be paid than by the Encyclopedia Britannica, which is the greatest all-age handicap in the world. That's the Melbourne Cup. During the time I was broadcasting, I give my vote to the best horse to win the race, to the New Zealander Rising Fast.
As they commence the run around the home turn now with about 2.5 furlongs to go, and Pandy Star is the leader from Gay Helios on the rails. Spiofolio pushing through on the inside has gone up into third place. Rising Fast on the outside has ranged up into fourth position. Prince Delville is on the rails next, and Commodore is finishing on well down the centre, followed by Captain Hunter and Helion on the outside with Emphatic and Rivera. Rising Fast has raced to the lead as they come down towards the furlong post. The New Zealand champion goes away to lead a length with about 3/4 of a furlong to go. Under the whip, Rising Fast about 1.5 lengths in front of Gay Helios. Helion on the outside is flying over the last 50 yards, but Rising Fast wins it. Rising Fast first, Helios.
The horse went home to New Zealand, but when he returned in 1955, he was given to the veteran Victorian trainer, Fred Hoysted. Carrying the big weight of 9 stone 10, he won the Caulfield Cup for the second time. With his penalty, it took his weight to a mammoth 10 stone in the Melbourne Cup.
as they make the turn now. 2.5 furlongs to go, and it would appear that Toporoa going fast on the outside has gone up to join them also, and getting a run through on the inside. Ray Ribbon, Toporoa, Devonfield, and here comes the champion rising fast on the outside. As they race down towards the furlong post, Toporoa shows the way. Rising fast has broken clear of the pack, going out after him now. Toporoa the leader, 3/4 of a furlong to go. Williamson gets to work on the champion, rising fast. He's about 1/2 length behind him and getting him at every stride. Toporoa's doing the job a little bit the better, and Toporoa beats Rising Fast. Sir William was third, followed by Red...
Rising Fast was perhaps a little unlucky that he did not go into the record book and make turf history as the only horse to have won the Caulfield Melbourne Cup double in successive years.
Joe Brown. I've talked about the sports which can vary in public favour, but for sheer consistency year in, year out, football ranks right at the top of the popularity list. Rules in the other southern states, and rugby league in New South Wales and Queensland. And while the popularity of the football code has remained constant, the style of broadcasting has changed. Here's former cricketer Hal Hooker calling a club match in Sydney in 1944.
Gully in possession. And now Gallagher toes it down to the halfway mark. And Joe's come in and fielded. And this is going to be close. It's going to be close. Here's North racing. Scully's got possession. And Scully goes over. And another try then to North Sydney. What a nice move then by North. Great football.
Hal Hooker was followed by well-known broadcasters Bernard Kerr, Brian McClenaghan and Bob Richardson in the 40s and 50s, and the change in commentary style became apparent in later years with no gaps and a greater emphasis on excitement. Great Britain playing Australia in Sydney, 1974. The commentator, John O'Reilly.
Now from the scrum, it's Australia's ball past to Fulton on the blind side, and he scores! Fulton's over for a try on the blind side of the scrum. Quick hand. The ball came out to Australia. Fulton moving up on quite a short blind side too. Took the pass from Rodonicus, and he dragged the defence over the line with him to score the first try of the game. Heskett, the Great Britain captain, to play it back now. And it's picked up by Nash. Pass to Nichols, and then Chisnell, and out now to Gill. Gill looks for support, got an inside pass to Dixon, and Dixon nearly lost the ball as he was tackled. The Australians trying to take it from him on the ground, but it's Dixon to get up and play it, 10 metres in Australia's half. Pass by Eckersley to Chisnell, then to Gill. A reverse pass to Nichols, and he's out of a tackle. He's got support. Got a good pass away to Nash, who's over the quarter line. Reverses it to Chisnell, and he'll score. What a good try for Great Britain. Chisnell through beside the post to put the ball down, and it's 3-all with a kick to come from nearly in front. What a good try by Great Britain. That's real ball work.
And that was John O'Reilly. And a couple of months ago, Alan Marks describing the thriller between South Sydney and Western Suburbs.
And this South Sydney side playing a lot tighter now as a pass is sent out towards Patterson, and he dummied. He's almost through. He is through. Patterson unloaded out there towards Simpkins. It's gone to O'Neill. A try coming up. The pass goes to Loftus. He's going to score under the post. Playing it now to Mario Fenech, and he gives the ball that way on the blind side to Tony Rantling. Danny Loftus. Loftus is through. Here's a try. Kenny Wright. He's over.
And I'm pleased to report that Alan Marks has recovered from that commentary. You know, it's possible to say some curious things in the heat of the moment in a running commentary, and this little gem of on-the-spot diagnosis was submitted by one of our younger commentators, Gordon Bray.
Dancy says offside, the Balmain players, and that was certainly a let-off for Manly, and I think it's Ian Martin on the ground. He looks as though he could have... he looks as though he may have swallowed his tongue here. The Manly trainer's in very quickly. He's in a lot of pain. No, it's his hamstring, I think, or his knee. Something to do with one of his legs. We're obscured at the moment.
I have visions there of with a tongue sticking out of his knee, but as commentators we've all had it suggested to us that we should swallow our own tongues at times. But next we go south to Melbourne for this report on Australia's #1 spectator sport, the VFL, and it's introduced by John Walters.
And now we take you over to the Melbourne Cricket Ground. Wedge along, a 4-goal, 7 behinds to Collingwood 3-5. At the moment, the ball has been forced out of bounds in Collingwood's forward pocket. McMaster and Mick Toomey set themselves to contest the throw, and McMaster wins out, palming the ball across to his rover Piento.
ABC Sport has been directly involved in descriptive broadcasts of Australian football. Initially, the Victorian Football League was suspicious of the effect of these broadcasts, as were most sports at the time. The principal opposition was fear of the effect broadcasts would have on attendances, a fear which was similarly expressed with the introduction of television some 24 years later. A technical operator in those early days was Jack O'Brien, And while equipment was bulky and set broadcast positions unheard of, the ABC commentators and technical staff certainly arrived in style.
Well, the Commission used to deal with a firm in Melbourne, City Motors, and they had, I think, about half a dozen Rolls Royces and I don't know how many Pierce Arrows, great big blue cars. Well, we used to arrive at a football ground. We'd have enough equipment to sink a ship. And, of course, when you arrived in the Rolls Royce, everybody would be looking at you to see what was going on. When they seen somebody come out with all this equipment, no tickets to get into the ground, so you bluffed your way through. They'd be glad to get rid of you from the turnstiles with all the equipment. Well, then you battled in. Well, some of the places where they had commentators had to broadcast from, well, I don't know how they ever done their job.
And for sheer excitement, it's hard to beat the VFL Grand Final. The first drawn Grand Final was in 1948, and the second was this match in 1977 between Collingwood and North Melbourne.
31 minutes gone. 31 minutes gone, Grand Final. The bell must be ringing shortly for North Melbourne supporters. A little bit more time since the Collingwood supporters.
Well, there can't be much left. They must be very close.
Well, the scoreboard here at the MCG. North Melbourne 9:22.76. Collingwood 9:16.60. There it is on the half-back flank, and a mark there to Picken, who's on the half-forward flank. Oh, he's going back now. Well, he's a defender. Let's sort of a kick. It's not a bad one, but it's going to drop well short. Up go the pack. There's a mark. A mark to Collingwood. Cross done.
Well, he's about 12 metres out and almost directly in front. So, Graham, you were brave enough to nominate a draw. I think we've got to go through these agonies once again. It looks very much like it.
I'm sure we have, Douglas. No North Melbourne player going to punch then, I noticed. Oh, if ever Twiggy Dunn thinks to kick a goal, he's got to kick this one.
Let's tell you that there are 34 players.
Dunn comes in, shoots, and it's through. Scores a level. 2 minutes gone. I think we could be back here. In fact, I'm sure of it. I think our panel engineered this one. They need the money.
Let's check the score in the Grand Final. Collingwood 76, North Melbourne 76. And the clock shows us we've gone 33 minutes, 32 and a half minutes in the last quarter. The siren must sound. 76 Collingwood, 76 North Melbourne. Scores a level. It's Ireland for Collingwood. He's taken the mark, and here they go. Bond's got it, and there's the siren.
And finally in this program, the Olympic Games. The ABC has presented on-the-spot coverages of all the Olympics since Helsinki in 1952 and has built up a fine reputation for quality broadcasts for both the Olympic and Commonwealth Games. First of all, Betty Cuthbert competing in Melbourne in 1956 over 100 metres. The commentator,
Set. A start in the 100 metres, and it's a good start too. It's Betty Cuthbert going like great guns in the centre of the track. Daniels on the outside is also doing well. But Betty Cuthbert's going to the tape, and Betty Cuthbert's going to win. Betty Cuthbert first. Betty Cuthbert first in the 100 metres. A gold medal for Australia. She got up just to beat Stubnick and Matthews, with Daniels very close. But Betty Cuthbert has won the day.
And then in Tokyo in 1964, the historic race in which Dawn Fraser is attempting to win her third Olympic gold medal. Commentator Bob Richardson.
It's a good start, and Fraser got a good start too. She came up first, swimming first. She's got a lead slightly of about 3 or 4 inches over Ellis of the United States. Bell of Australia is going well, so too is Stout of the United States. There's very little between them as they pass the 25-metre mark, although Fraser's got a slight advantage. Lay of Canada going very strongly, so too is Stouter and Bell. Coming down towards the first turn, Fraser has the advantage. She's coming into the turn now. It's Fraser to go around first, followed by Stouter. She's not far behind her, then comes Lay, then comes Bell. 27.5 is a new world record inside here. Fraser with 48 metres to go. Opening up a lead now. Stouter's matching her stroke for stroke. Doing particularly well too is Ellis of the United States. Stouter is hanging on to Fraser. 15 metres to go. Fraser has a slight advantage. Stouter's going with her. Ellis is in third place. Then comes Lay and Bell. Fraser now coming in with about 5 metres to go. The time is 56, 57, 58, 59, 59. Fraser first, Dowder second, Ellis is third, then comes Lay and the rest swimming in.
And finally, from Mexico in 1968, Australia's greatest ever medal winner, Michael Wendon, who won 11 gold medals in all in both the Olympic and Commonwealth Games. The commentator here is Arthur Denovan.
100 metres to go, and Michael Wendon of Australia, the Olympic record holder for this distance now, with 159.3, and gold medal winner in the 100, holds a half-yard lead over Don Chalander, stroking magnificently over in lane 6, his classic style, but it's still Wendon. Chalander's got to catch him in the run home. With 60 metres to travel, it's still Wendon of Australia in front of John Chalander. In third place is John Nelson of the United States, and the rest are dropping back. Wendon in front as they make the turn with 50 metres to go. Michael Wendon, swimming magnificently, is about a half yard in front of Don Chalander of the United States. And I don't think he can catch Wendon. 25 metres to go. Wendon is swimming strongly. Chalander's coming home with a great bird. Michael Wendon of Australia in lane 4, holding to his half-yard lead. It looks like the second gold medal for Wendon. Wendon 15 metres to go in front, and Wendon must win for Australia. In goes Michael Wendon to win the 200. Don Chalander second.
That then is 50 years of sport broadcasting on the ABC. I'll leave with the little phrase, "We're still on the air, mate." And I'll hand you over now to the ABC's Director of Sport, Derek White.
Those were some of the highlights of half a century of Australian sport and a great tradition of sports broadcasting. Since that first race call in 1932, ABC commentators have been carrying the excitement and enjoyment of sport to people throughout Australia. They will go on doing so, and Australians will hope that all calls end in excitement like this. Norman May in Moscow, Olympic.
He's swimming his life out here, and he's catching up on the Russian. He's coming at the Russian now. He's finishing very strongly. There's only half a length in this. Neil Brooks must be a chance here. It's everybody's go. In they go. And Brooks is just behind Kaplarkov. He came up in the dive, the two swimmers together. This may be a gold medal to Australia. Brooks has gone past him. Brooks is up with him now. And Australia is just in front. It's Kaplarkov and Brooks is looking across at him. Now this is going to be a sprint down the last lap. Now can Australia win its first gold medal? Neil Brooks is in front, going down towards the 50-metre turn. He's just in front of Kaplarkov. He can swim 50 seconds for 100. Brooks. Round he goes, Australia in front. It's Brooks coming out of a very long push. It's Brooks and Kaplarkov in the second lap. Straight for straight they go. The crowd's going wild. Australia in front. It's Neil Brooks and Kaplarkov. Forget the rest. It's Brooks and Kaplarkov. Who can win? Brooks is just a fraction in front. Straight to go. 15 metres from a gold medal for Australia. 15 metres. 10 metres now. Brooks in front. It could be Australia's gold. 5 metres. 4, 3, 2, 1. Gold! Gold to Australia. Gold! 3:45.7. An absolutely fantastic performance.
The commentator who made the statement, "I'm on the air, mate," was Roger Wilson. And other ABC commentators who featured in the program were on cricket, Charles Moses, Alan McGilvray, Vic Richardson, Mel Morris, Bernard Kerr, Bob Richardson, Michael Charlton, and Johnny Moyes. On the synthetic rugby broadcasts, Cyril Towers. On boxing, Lockie Melville and Harold Baker. On tennis, Ellis Blaine. On rugby union, Ron Davies. On soccer, Martin Royal and Peter Wilkins. On the America's Cup, Bert Oliver. On pacing, George Griliusich. On racing, Keith Nowd, Lockie Melville, Jeff Marnie and Joe Brown. On rugby league, Hal Hooker, John O'Reilly, Alan Marks and Gordon Bray. On VFL, Noel Bailey, Graham Dawson, Clark Hansen and Doug Bigelow. And the Olympic Games, Ray McDonald, Bob Richardson, Arthur Denovan, Norman May. I'm on the Air, Mate was written and presented by Norman May. Research, Bill McGowan. Technical operator, Stan Lewandowski. Produced by Tony Twist and Bill McGowan. Executive producer, Alan Marks. Marking 50 years of broadcasting on the ABC Eastern Time, 1 o'clock.